Hi, everyone. Bok. Thank you for joining my talk. Today, I'm going to share some experiences about how I've designed for users across different cultures. And my name is Jenny, and I'm a senior UX designer at TopTel. And I also organize UX meetup for a global nonprofit organization called Ladies at UX. And as Steve mentioned, I am from Taiwan. And I've lived in several different countries. When I was 12, my family moved to Canada, so I actually grew up there. And since 2012, I've lived in different countries, from India to the US to Singapore, and now I'm settled in the Netherlands. So I have some experiences, and I experienced the culture shock from a lot of different places. And so far, I've traveled to a lot of countries and have worked for a lot of clients from different countries, and I've designed for users from over 20 different countries. Let's actually have a show of hands as people are coming in. Who here are from Croatia? Cool, most of you. Who are not from Croatia? Yeah, it's actually a lot of people too. And who would like to design for users outside of their own country? Is there anyone? That's a lot of people, so I hope that today you'll have some learnings from my talk. And in this talk, we'll go over what is culture, and how does culture actually affect our work as designers and developers. I also talk about the different in cultures that manifest in the UX and UI, and some common mistakes in localization that companies made, as well as the secrets to world domination. So first thing, before I go into the differences of culture, let's talk about what is culture. And according to Dutch social psychologist Geert Hofstede, he says this is the difference between one group of people and the other group of people. And he has done a research, and he summarizes 6 cultural dimensions. And this is how Croatia is different from Taiwan in the culture differences. And as you can see, Taiwan actually scores higher than Croatia in long-term orientation, but Croatia scores higher in uncertainty avoidance. So in my talk, I'll go over how the different dimensions influence the UX UI. And Erin Mayer, she did a research on actually how culture differences affect how we do business as well.
You might be a star negotiator in your own country, but in today's global economy, your skills may not automatically translate to other cultures. For instance, in some cultures, it's entirely appropriate to show emotion during a negotiation, to raise your voice, laugh passionately, or even put a friendly arm around your counterpart. In others, this much expression not only feels intrusive or surprising, but may be viewed as immature or unprofessional. Then there's open disagreement. Negotiators often assume that more expressive cultures are also more confrontational, but that isn't always the case. In some countries, such as France and Israel, emotions pour out, including disagreement. But for other very expressive cultures, such as Brazil, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia, open disagreement could be seen as insulting. Some less expressive cultures, such as Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands, see open disagreement and debate as positive and necessary, as long as it's expressed calmly and factually. Others tend to be both less emotional and non-confrontational, which means you'll have to be especially attuned to subtle cues for both positive and negative responses. It's also important to learn how others build trust. There are 2 distinct types, cognitive and affective, and in a business setting, the dominant type of trust varies from one culture to another. Cognitive trust is task-based. It comes from the head and is built on your counterpart's accomplishments, skills, and reliability. American culture offers a good example of this kind of trust. In the United States, getting too emotionally close to a business counterpart is seen as unprofessional, and mixing the personal and professional is seen as risky. Affective trust is relationship-based and comes from the heart. It arises from the feelings of emotional closeness, empathy, and friendship that are developed gradually through sharing meals, evening drinks, and coffee breaks. In China, for instance, negotiators are unlikely to trust their counterparts until an effective connection has been made. Adapting your negotiation approach accordingly will help you get to yes, or sí, ja, oui, hi, and da.
So that's her research on how culture affects in business. And I know Croatia wasn't listed here, but from talking to people, my understanding is that Croatia tends to be in the middle for confrontational and non-confrontational. And in terms of being emotionally expressive, it depends on the north and south. So that's my understanding of the Croatian culture. And so now you learn that culture actually differences affect how we do business. And you might think that what does it actually mean for designers and developers? Isn't it just about handshake versus kisses on the cheek versus a bow? But actually, according to research, cultural differences affect a lot of things. From how users perceive information to how the internet is used and how the e-commerce and the marketing. And from the user's perspective, users want something that acknowledges their cultural differences and business practices. And it is not enough just to translate your product into their local language anymore. And here I want to give some tips from my experience of designing for users across cultures. The first one is to research the local culture. And I'm currently living in the Netherlands for about 2 years now. And I actually, from living in the Netherlands, I learned I guess some understanding about the Dutch culture. And according to Geert Hofstede, the Dutch culture has these cultural dimensions, scoring high in individualism, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation. And his summary of the Dutch culture is that they are pragmatic, they have a strong propensity to save, and they are very thrifty. In one of my very first projects at a Dutch company I used to work for, this was a form to ask the users to put in their passport names because the travel agency I work for, they are going to book flight tickets for the users. So the problem there was users were filling in their nicknames and initials, which is quite common in the Dutch culture, but you cannot book a flight ticket with that name. So my role was to design some UI that made the user aware and putting the correct names in this form. And what I did is that I added an icon of the passport, and I made the text big and bold, and I even added a consequence. I added this text that says, make sure to fill in the name as it is your passport, and if this name is incorrect, then you could be refused at the gates for your flight. And I thought that was a serious consequence, right? Like, surely user will now get their passport and filling in their correct names. But after we rolled out the design and we tested it for 2 weeks, we found that it wasn't very effective, and users were still filling in the incorrect names. And I started to research into some other Dutch sites, like airline websites, and see how they handled it. And this is the booking page for a Dutch airline called Transavia. And as you can see, it actually has a really big text and tell the user to fill in the name as in the passport. And are you not sure if the names is in the same as the passport? You can pay €4, and that gives you ability to change. Or you could pay €50 if the name is incorrect. So later on, I found that this is probably a more effective approach for the Dutch user. And that leads to my finding is that in the Dutch culture, money can motivate and demotivate people. That means if you want the user to do something, maybe give some incentive, like a discount or something, a freebie. And if you don't want the user to do something, you can use money or a payment as a punishment. The next culture I'd like to talk about is their neighbor, Germany. And according to Geert Hofstede, the cultural dimensions for Germany is that they score high in individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation. And Hofstede summarized the German culture. And it says that the Germans need a systematic overview and that they need details to proceed, and that they read information in such things that it's very well thought out. Here's an example of Dutch versus German culture. So this is the booking page for the Dutch site for Travelbird. And this is the German site. Did you spot the difference? The difference is that there is a list of inclusive and exclusive. So what is included in this flight package? Does it include airport transfer, or does it include like baggage? And usually, people will assume that telling the user what is excluded could actually prevent them from booking. But actually, we tested this at Travelbird, and we found that having this list and telling users what exactly they're getting and what exactly they're not getting could actually help the conversion rates. And finally, we added the trust icons at the bottom of the page so that it gives the user more trust in order to proceed with booking. Another example is this feature that allows the user to book offers that are in driving distance. And there's the difference in these two mockups. One is before I verify this with German users, and the other one is after. So one is the final one. Take a guess which one is the final one. The answer is correct. The answer is the left one. And the difference is that it's kilometers versus the number of hours the user have to drive. And why is that? Based on my conversation with the German users and managers, they actually prefer something that's more precise. For example, when I designed it, what I put in the hours is because I thought it's easy for me to understand I need to drive 4 hours or 5 hours, 6 hours. But for a German user, they might take 1 hour to drive somewhere that I drive for 4 hours. So this is not precise enough, and for the German local, it's very important to put in something that's precise. Just fix the microphone. And the second tip is to do usability tests with the local people. For example, for one of my clients, we did usability tests, and to actually learn about how users of different cultures that live in the Netherlands perceive our product. And we actually had a usability lab that we could use eye tracking, and it was very useful to know. We actually studied users from over 8 different cultures to come to test our product and actually see how it's different. And if you don't have the resources, you can actually go for remote user testing. And this is one of the example. Sorry. This is one of the example. Yeah, this.
I actually hear you, okay?
Oh, okay. One of the example that me was doing a remote user testing with a user in the Philippines. So what I did is I had a Skype and screen share, and I was able to record the user and also how they use the product. And if you don't have time to do this, or if you don't actually have a usability lab or eye tracking lab, then you can actually hire these services that can just send you the videos that were recorded. And these actually have users from different locales. So if you need users from the USA or India, so make sure to check some of these services. The next tip is to measure the data. For one of my clients, they approached me to help them increase the conversion rate for the German locale. And so this was the site before. And what I did is that I measured the data with heat maps and Google Analytics. And my finding was that the users were, well, first, high dropouts on the homepage. That's why they needed to increase the conversion rate. And second, users were clicking on help and company-related links. And that raised my curiosity, like, why does a user actually want to learn more about a company? Why don't they just go ahead and book something? And my assumption was that for the German users, there was a lack of trust, and also the website was too ambiguous. It didn't really have any information on the website or explanation about who the company is. So I provided several suggestions for my client. First, they should add the trust logos from trustshops.de, which is a pretty common pattern or standard for German e-commerce websites. The second one was to add the reviews from the German customer, make it seem that it's actually for the German customers. And they should add accepted payment methods and the customers in the roster, and finally add some description about the company. Make sure that it's, even though it's a startup, it's still a legit company. And the result, or the redesign, was that it included these findings with the ratings, the reviews, the trust badges, and also the company information. Another thing we implemented for the German locale was, based on this research, paragraph format is used twice as much in Germany compared to the US. Remember what I mentioned previously, that they need precision, they need a lot of information in order to proceed. This is the Dutch version of the client site. And this is where the user will book a venue and continue on. And there's information about the venue and about the parking. And this is the Dutch website. And because of that research, we increased the text to more than double, so that we provide user a lot of information so that they have more confidence and learn more about the venue before they start to book. And with all these patterns, we were actually successful in increasing the conversion rate for the German locale. The next tip is to localize the copy and learn about the local vocabulary. For one of my past clients that are offering monthly accommodations, and we were working on the site, and we noticed that there was a term for monthly accommodation that we need to decide on, because we wanted to expand into multiple markets like Brazil and Hong Kong and US and Taiwan. And because of the team are from different backgrounds, we noticed that there are like a lot of different terms to describe monthly accommodation, like accommodation for 1 month or longer. And based on my research, that every different country actually do use different terms for this monthly accommodation. Another example is that when I worked for a client in the Philippines, I needed to design a marketing graphic for buy one, get one free. And that was a North American English I started designing with. And then when I showed it to the Filipino project manager, then she said, well, we don't use buy one, get one free. We say buy one, take one, which was new to me. And when I lived in Holland, I noticed that the term they use there is 1+1. So therefore, I researched the local vocabulary so that you can have effective marketing copy. The next tip is to start by designing the language or the translation that had the longest width. So this is the one of a project I did at Travelbird, which is the download banner at the top. And my initial reaction was to design in English, because I speak it kind of fluently, and I designed it later in Dutch, which I thought, okay, it looks quite okay, until the colleague pointed out that I need to design in Finnish. And that's where the problem was. So in Finnish, the text actually becomes longer, and that it was almost touching the download or open button, which is not good, because depending on the screen size, and there could be some overlapping or cutting off. And the solution here was to increase the vertical space to 3 lines. And after adopting this approach, and you can see that in Dutch and in Finnish, actually the text looks okay, because there's now more width, more height in the vertical space. And similarly, in different languages, you might also run into cases where the strings are long or short, and you need to accommodate both of those. So this is a Japanese site, and as you can see, like the product names could be long or short. So by having more vertical space, you can now accommodate both scenarios. The next tip is to research the local UI pattern. Did you know that in China, they don't use the hamburger menu? They don't use the 3 dots, more button, like you see on Facebook and other popular apps. They actually have something that's called Discover, and that usually takes form in an icon of a compass or search. And then Gover is an ex-project manager at Tencent WeChat, and he studied a lot of Chinese apps and found that really nobody uses the hamburger menu. They use the discover icon. Another example of East versus West UI pattern is this. So this is American Mozilla site. And as you can see, it's very clean. It has a really clear call to action button. But when you go to China, it's a different design. And you're like, where's the download button? Actually, the green one is not download. It's to post. So that's a very interesting difference in the UI. And then Brent Patil, who is a design strategist at Mozilla, he went to research why that is. What he did is that he looked at different popular sites, the most used sites in both US and China, and he noticed that so the number one most used site in both locations is Baidu and Google, which use the more searching kind of layouts, really clean. But when you look at the other sites that are popular in both locations, you see that Sina and Weibo and Yahoo actually have a portal kind of design that looks like this, which is with a lot of different information. And his assumption why that is because typing Chinese is not easy. And because it takes a lot of time to find the right word, so we should design the site to optimize for browsing to allow the user to find information. Another pattern common in the east part of the world I want to talk about is, say, for Japan. And Japan actually scores high in masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation. And while designing for clients in e-commerce in Japan, I found there's one common pattern, which is the ranking of products. So in almost every single site, you can see that users are searching for what other people find is popular and interesting, and they want to have exactly the same. But in the US, it's a completely different story. People go to secondhand shops so they can buy that very unique thing that nobody else has. So you see that there's this difference between wanting to be unique and wanting to become part of a society. And my finding was that in collectivistic societies, what other people are buying, saying, or doing are highly valuable. And this is also common in Singapore and Taiwan, where the countries I have lived in. The next tip is to design personas of users, of local users. For example, like these. And the persona is basically a graphic with users' behaviors and wants and needs and goals, and so that you can put the user in front of you when you are designing your product. And as you're designing the persona, you might actually need to have an avatar for the user. And when designers and developers return to the avatar generators, we see something like this. And if you're designing for Caucasians, it might actually work. But if your goal is to design for users in different cultures, like India or Mexico, or for example, like different cultures, then this probably wouldn't work. So here I want to recommend a tool. It's called Diverse UI. And in Diverse UI, you can find users of different cultures and their faces to use in your mockups. And here I want to highlight the importance of this is because having the local users in their faces in your designs actually help you, your team, and your stakeholders imagine that these users are the ones using your product. So it's actually very valuable. Next, let's talk about the common mistakes that companies make in localization. Of course, I'm going to talk about don't Google Translate. The sockets are all working? Like, what does that mean? What they meant to say is that the ventilators are not working. But this is what happens when you use Google Translate. So, big no-no. Another example I saw on Dribbble was that a company needed to go to China and meet some potential client. So they were being very nice and thought that we need to localize our business card so then we can impress the client. So they tried to localize the business card, but however, as a Chinese reading person, I spotted a few mistakes. So first, his name is Robert Viz, but in his translation, his name became Robert Ko. Secondly, CEO is translated wrong. Third thing is that the Dutch phone number format actually looks like a string of random numbers because we do not put spaces in between every 2 letters. Lastly, the best from Amsterdam was translated to better be from Amsterdam. So that teaches, don't use Google Translate in anything that goes to production environment or doing business. The next mistake I see is that people tend to idealize the designs. So we know that, oh no, the iPhone 10 just came out, and there's this like notch, and then designers start to post like really fancy designs on Dribbble and talk about the notch and how to design creatively for the notch. But I see that as a first world problem. Why is that? Because if we're designing for the iPhone 10 and like all the newest model that just came out, we're basically designing for just 1% of the population and even less. In one of the projects I did for the Filipino client, we were looking into who are these users and what are the mobile devices they were using. And we know that they are using Android, but exact phone models were kind of surprising. So they were using really small feature phones, and the most common one was the Samsung Galaxy Y with like really small screen width, which makes the designer just go crazy. And what I did is that I imagined it can be kind of hard and clumsy to use this little screen. So my approach was to actually buy this phone, this tiny phone, and to go through the user experiences and then run through the mockups on this phone so I can test if the text is legible. I could test if the user experience is smooth. I can test if the button sizes I made are tappable. And another thing we had to design for the Philippines is the web phones. Who here are familiar with the web phones? Little people. Yeah, so it was a very long time ago that people used web phones. And we had to design for users that have web phones because that's actually what they use. So the takeaway here is to research what mobile devices your users have if you're designing for emerging markets. The next mistake I want to talk about is that people tend to have cultural stereotypes when they are approaching designing for users in different cultures. For example, if users are too emotional, or users are too smart, or users are too pretty, like this is a really oversimplified kind of stereotype. And the difference between stereotype and cultural characteristic is that cultural characteristics are backed by research. And it's not just a really general statement that covers everybody in that culture. Finally, I want to talk about the secrets to world domination. If you want to design a product and have users all over the world that use it, from North America to South America to Asia to Russia to India, and then here are some observations from working with clients from multiple countries and cultures, and some of the things that companies who succeed, they do it, and versus the ones who don't. The first tip is that the companies who succeed in designing for international users, they have a diverse team. Why is diversity important? According to this agency based in London who designed for users, clients for over Europe, they actually have found that having a diverse team and have a mixed background allow them to generate more creative ideas and actually creating interesting connections. Therefore, having diversity in your team also allows different experiences and talents and knowledge about different cultures to come together to design for users around the world. The next tip I want to talk about is travel and ethnography research. Who here have traveled from somewhere else to come to the conference? Actually, a handful of people. That's really great, because I love travel. And tell you what, design is not my biggest passion. Travel is. So travel is my biggest passion, and having this passion to travel and learn about users of different cultures actually became an asset in designing for users across different cultures. And not only when you travel, you learn about different cultures, it actually helps you to open your mind, be more open-minded about different cultures. And that actually allows you to do ethnographic research. You learn about the user's actual behavior, which is really beneficial when you're designing for users of different cultures. And according to research, travel can actually make one more open-minded and positive towards people in different cultures and the people of the countries that you visit, and also towards diversity more in general. So travel is very beneficial to design for users across cultures. And here's the main takeaway. And if you want to dominate the world, you want your product, that whatever you're designing, is used by people over the world, make sure to have a diverse team and make sure that you travel and you really research your users, and you may be on your world to the world domination. Voila.
Okay, we have plenty of time for questions. Please put your hand up and keep it up if you have questions. Lucian with the first.
Thank you, Jenny, for a great talk. One question: when you are doing usability studies, testing your ideas, do you always use online services for that? Or do you try to find some local people and do the usability tests there? Like if you're in Netherlands, do you do usability tests there? Or
Yeah, so I think it depends on the resources the company have. I have worked with clients that work on site, and I was able to conduct the usability testing. For example, the one with the eye tracking lab, so I was really lucky to have that resource to do it. And I just recruited a lot of people to come to the lab. And sometimes when a client doesn't really have budget, and we go for remote testing. And when I work with startups, they tend to like the really lean and scrappy research. And what I did recently is that I'm designing for a client that wants to target Singapore, but I currently don't really have access to Singaporean users. So what I did is that I talked to UX designers in Singapore who have talked to the users. And when I have enough resources and time, I just also conduct the research remotely, like by survey or by some of the services I have mentioned. So it really depends on like the time and resources.
Other questions?
Hi, thank you for the lecture. My question is, who is in charge of this kind of research before you start the design? Is it like you personally as a designer, or you have a team, or somebody else? Like, do you just Google things and you trust that it's correct? Or what's the process before
Usually I'm the lead UX designer, and I kind of take the initiative to say we need to do research, because sadly, nobody else says that. I'm like, we need the research. We don't have any research findings about something that back up what our assumption was. So yeah, I do work in a team. Usually I'm the UX designer and other are UI. So I would say it depends, but you can work with a team. If you, for example, if you have a user researcher in your team or another UX designer who knows about the culture, then why not collaborate? And then maybe you work for, you research for that region, someone else research for that region. Does that answer your question?
Enough, I think.
Hello, yes, I have a question. How important do you think that such sociological research is important in development? Because it seems that some of the most popular companies like Facebook, Instagram, whatever, don't utilize research like that. It's the same everywhere. So do you think it's really that crucial, or is it just something we should pay attention to?
It is certainly crucial. And I would say that the current status quo, or the fact that a lot of companies, they don't do research, they are missing out. Because in the end, we're designing for the users. We're designing not based on our assumptions, but I mean, I'm a UX advocate, and I always advocate the research. Even if we don't have the resources, I do some really lean and scrappy research. And I would say, like, convincing stakeholders of why research is valuable. It's kind of like another topic I can do another day. But certainly, to answer your questions very short, research is valuable, certainly. And then the companies who don't do research, they are missing out. And they actually getting to a risk of spending 2 years developing something. They think it's so great, and they launch it, and nobody knows how to use it. So I hope that answers your question.
Other questions, follow-ups? So you mentioned adding trust badges to your website, and I've actually seen some research that they can reduce the trust of the users. So my question is, do you have any experience with trust badges outside of Germany? And was that actually explicitly A/B tested?
So the trust badges, I think in general, when we're designing for conversion rates or e-commerce, anything that can increase trust is a good thing. And maybe for outside of Germany, they don't use trust badges. But say from my experience of designing for users across cultures, there's many ways to design for trust. For example, testimonials. For example, how many people are using the product, or how many people have, for example, if you have like app downloads of like 10,000 people, and then that actually increases trust for something else. And for example, like Taiwan, where it's high in the hierarchy, which means it's really high in power distance, they find it that to talk about big company names or big celebrity names actually have increased the trust. So I don't know where the research or the article you showed that having trust badges actually decrease the conversion rate. I would say that for every single region or culture, it's something that you need to test. There's not like trust badges is applied for all of the countries around the world. So it's like that for Germany, and then for Taiwan or another culture, it's different.
More questions? I have one. You said that you like to travel. Which country provided you with, I guess, the biggest surprise as far as your preconceived notions about what you expected to see there from the people, from the culture?
Oh, surprises. I would say from right now the top of my mind will be India. When I went to India, my friends were like, what? Why are you going to India? It's like kind of like one of the last places they would imagine like a solo female traveler to go. But I found that yeah, it was very interesting, and how they have said yes and no is different, and then how they have like a really friendly way, but not so efficient in terms of my experience. Like I would ask them, oh, so when are you going to pick me up? Oh, 5 minutes or just around the corner. And I waited 30 minutes, and I waited an hour, call them, oh, where are you? Like, where are you going to pick me up? Oh, in 5 minutes around the corner. So that was like something that's really different. And, but I learned to appreciate it, and I did actually have fun in India.
Great, thanks. Last chance for questions. Thanks again, Jenny.